Hi everybody, welcome to week 4. We are officially over the halfway mark. Congratulations. Hopefully it's been a good experience so far, and obviously as we move forward you can continue to ask me any questions that you might have. You can email me, or of course we can meet in person if that would be beneficial. This week we're going to continue to look at the adult population, but we're going to delve a little bit deeper and look at specific subgroups of adults. In particular, we're going to look at victims of domestic violence and other forms of interpersonal violence. We're going to look at the immigrant population, and we will look at the LGBTQ population. And we will look at specific policies that impact those subgroups. For this week, you will obviously watch this mini lecture, which you're doing right now. You will also have to read chapters 10 and 11 in the textbook. And then you'll have to read some additional materials about the Violence Against Women Act, again about the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals Act, as well as for the same-sex marriage policy. Once you have reviewed all of those materials, you can then go ahead and complete the discussion board as well as the quiz, which of course you can access right here at the bottom of your Module 4 page. As usual, let's go ahead and take a look at the PowerPoint together. So again, we're focusing in on specific groups of adults. We are going to look at victims of power-based violence, we're going to look at immigrants, and we will also look at individuals who identify as LGBTQ. So the reason why we're picking these specific populations is because those populations have had their policies in the spotlight quite often in recent years. Those policies have been in flux or specifically highlighted in recent years. So that's why we want to look at the Violence Against Women Act, we want to look at DACA, so the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and we also want to look at same-sex marriage policy. We're going to start off with victims of power-based violence. So before we talk about policy, I would like to just provide some statistics about power-based violence. We'll look at sexual assault statistics, intimate partner violence statistics, and then also stalking statistics. So when we look at sexual assault, the numbers are quite staggering. 1 in 5 women and 1 in 71 men will be raped at some point in their lifetime. That is, again, quite staggering. Then when we look at sexual assaults other than rape, what we find is that 46.4% of lesbians, 74.9% of bisexual women, and 43.3% of heterosexual women report experiencing sexual violence other than rape in their lifetimes. Similarly, among men, 40.2% of gay men, 47.4% of bisexual men, and 20.8% of heterosexual men report some type of sexual violence in their lifetime other than rape. Then when we look at intimate partner violence, what we see is that 1/3 of women and 1/4 of men have been physically abused by an intimate partner violence. And furthermore, that 1 in 5 women and 1 in 7 men have been severely physically abused by an intimate partner. Intimate partner violence is most common in the age range of 18 to 24, which is college-age women, might I add. That's important to note. Then when we look at stalking, 1 in 7 women and 1 in 18 men have been stalked. Of course, stalking involves causing the target to fear somebody close to them, fear that that person might harm or kill them. So again, based on these statistics, we can see that power-based violence is very common and that it's important for us to focus on some policies that address partner violence. So we know that power-based personal violence has been highlighted in the media quite a bit. There have been a lot of sexual harassment cases that have come to the forefront. The Me Too campaign is a perfect example of how this issue has been brought to the forefront in our popular culture. The main policy that exists related to this topic is the Violence Against Women Act. The Violence Against Women Act, or short VAWA, VAWA was passed in 1994 by under the leadership of then Senator Joe Biden. The federal legislation that was passed at that point offers a comprehensive approach to deal with violence against women. It includes new provisions to hold offenders accountable, as well as some intervention services for victims of that type of violence. So VAWA is one of the policies that you'll be asked to delve a little bit deeper into during this module. The next group we're going to look at is immigrants. So when we look at the immigrant population in the United States, it has been on the rise. You can look at the chart here. When you look at the orange one, it's the immigrants as a percentage of the U.S. population. You can tell that from about the 70s until now, it has been a steady increase. When we look at the numbers here on the right, you'll see that in 2014, about 13.3% of the U.S. population was made up of immigrants and their U.S.-born children. In 2016, that number had gone up to 26% of the U.S. population being comprised of immigrants and U.S.-born children. So obviously there has been a steep increase, so it's very important for us to examine the policies that impact this population and ensure as social workers that this population is being taken care of, that we're doing everything we need to ensure that this population is offered the opportunity for success. The policy that we're going to look at with regards to immigration is DACA. DACA is the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. This policy has been in the spotlight a lot in the last year, especially since President Trump has been making efforts to eliminate this policy altogether. So when we look at what DACA actually is, it is an immigration policy. It was implemented by President Obama. It allows people who were brought to the U.S. illegally as children, so if they arrived illegally in the United States before their 16th birthday, they are allowed to request a deferred action for a period of 2 years. So what that means is that they can defer deportation for 2 years, and in addition to deferring deportation, they also receive a work permit so that they can work legally in this country during those 2 years. After those 2 years are up, they can then ask for a renewal so that they can stay for an additional 2 years. An estimated 1,326,000 people meet the criteria for DACA, but only 682,750 individuals are currently participating in DACA. So there's only a participation rate of about 52%. Again, this policy is currently in danger. It is at risk of being removed by the current Trump administration. So it's important for us as social workers to be up to date on what is going on with this policy. So again, this is another policy that you'll be delving into a bit deeper during this module. And then finally, we're going to look at the LGBTQ population. So the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning population is a very substantial population in our country. We have approximately 9 million people in the U.S. who identify as LGBTQ. It's estimated that at least 3.5% of Americans identify as gay, lesbian, bisexual, or some other sexual orientation other than heterosexual. That is a very low estimate. I've seen other estimates in the literature that suggest more, that approximately 15% of the population identifies as something other than heterosexual. In addition, about 0.3% of the population identifies as transgender. Transgender does not have to do with your sexual orientation, so it doesn't have to do with who you're sexually attracted to. If you're transgender, it means that your physical anatomy does not line up with the gender that you identify with in your mind. So there is a discord between the gender that you perceive yourself as and the external genitalia that you have. The LGBTQ community has suffered great discrimination in this country on an ongoing basis. Our modern day LGBT civil rights movement was really started after the Stonewall Uprising. The Stonewall Uprising occurred in 1969. There was a police raid on the Stonewall Inn, which was a popular gay bar in New York City. And a lot of people got injured as a result of this raid. As this raid started, it resulted in some riots in the streets of New York City that lasted for several days, and those riots were really the beginning of our modern-day LGBTQ civil rights movement. So it was a very, very important event. Over recent years, the LGBTQ community has had some great political victories, with same-sex marriage bans being found unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. So again, that means that the Supreme Court said states can no longer ban same-sex marriage. In other words, same-sex marriage is now legal in all 50 states. In 2015, the Gallup estimated that about 780,000 Americans are in same-sex marriages, and then another 2 million live with a same-sex domestic partner. Of course, with the recent the recent victories that now allow same-sex marriage, we expect that the number of same-sex marriages will increase dramatically. So given the major policy changes that have occurred in this area of same-sex marriage over the past 5 years, it's really important for us, again, as social workers, to examine the current state of policy surrounding same-sex marriage. So again, that'll be another focus for this week. So for this module, again, you will have to read chapters 10 and 11 in the textbook. Some of the content in the book pertaining to same-sex marriage is outdated because the book was published in 2010 and a lot has happened since then, both in terms of immigration as well as in terms of same-sex marriage. So the supplemental materials that I'm providing you will give you an up-to-date view of these issues. Aside from reading the chapters, you will also have to read the supplemental materials about VAWA, about DACA, and about same-sex marriage policy. And once you've reviewed all those materials, then you can complete the discussion board and the quiz for this week. Again, these topics are really important. It's important for us to stay up to date on the policies that are changing. These are some of the policies that are really in the spotlight right now. They are changing, and there have certainly been huge changes on all three of these fronts within the last 5 to 10 years. So it's important for us to stay up to date, and we need to stay up to date in order to be able to best advocate for these populations. Again, if you have any questions for me at all, please let me know. Send me an email. If you want to meet with me in person, then let me know that as well, and we can certainly set up a meeting together. Have a great week 4 of this class, and I will have another video for you next week. Thank you.